Now, I want to display this so that you're seeing the big screen. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I just want to say that I'm really happy to be part of this program. I really am enjoying working with Shuli and Rachel. And also, I loved watching Tina and Richard's presentations, and I'm looking forward to Ellen and Jonas. So let's begin. So we are tasked to provide reflections and insights on how to personalize one's read of a text and how to glean creative inspiration from it. That's directly from Davir's email when I asked him to clarify what this is all about. And thinking about working from text brought me back to the very beginnings of my love of art, which started with books. I'm a big reader, I always was, and I especially loved picture books. And my mother brought me to the library every week, and I would come home with a stack of them. And one of my very favorites was the Madeline books. And this picture is from Madeline in London. And I loved the narrative. I loved all the detail in the pictures and what it taught me about life in faraway places. And like probably all of you, I loved making art from a very early age. This is a picture that I drew at the age of 5 of a tugboat. I was sitting by the lakeshore, Lake Michigan. I grew up in Milwaukee, and it started raining, so then I had to add the rain. So I'm sure that you all have memories going back to early childhood of making art. So by the time I was in high school, I was still making art, and I had learned calligraphy. And at the age of 17, I learned about the art of the ketubah, the Jewish marriage contract, and I completely fell in love with it, and I started making them. So thinking about the idea of text, the relationship of text to art, I was relating it visually by writing a text and creating art around it, but also the idea of concepts which came through Judaism, which entered into my artwork here. Eitz Chaim Hi, she's a tree of life to those who hold on to her. It's a reference to the Torah. And I would say that for myself, I think the tree is really my default image, both because of the significance and the symbolism of it representing the Torah, our faith and our heritage, which is deeply rooted and continues to flourish and grow and change, but also because I love being outdoors and I love the woods. So for me, it's just a really intense and powerful double image. So many of my ketubot, like those of other artists, contain trees and various iterations. And you can easily see that the one on the left is a mashup of Van Gogh's Starry Night. So of course, we are all influenced by what we see in the art world as well as what we see in life. And the one on the right is a much more kind of simple and austere iteration of the trees. And the text in this case, I formatted digitally. So sometimes I work with Hebrew text that way. The one on the left is handwritten, as was the earlier one. And here are more versions of the trees. The ones on the right are birch trees, which I've spent a lot of summertime, summers really up in northern Wisconsin, and I love birch trees. So this is really a portrait of my happy place. And then on the left, you can see that it's a completely different composition, and there is a tree in the center. But I wanted to introduce the idea of the calligraphy itself, the Hebrew calligraphy, as a decorative element, which you see it in the banner across the top. Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. So here on the left, the text became totally incorporated into the work of art. It's not separate anymore. And the calligraphy in the text is really part of the decoration and the decorative element in the design of the piece. And you can see that there are textual elements, ani l'dodi v'dodi li, which are larger and much more kind of animated. And I have to say that for me, Hebrew letters, a line of text, to me, it looks like little dancers. And when I look at a page of Torah in the actual Torah scroll, all of those little letters that make up the text and the meaning, to me, they look like our people. They look like they're animated people having a conversation, moving through space. So there's a real vitality to Hebrew letters in my mind. And then the piece on the right is totally different. The lettering also was done digitally. And it was done actually for some people who love the Grateful Dead. So they're all about the tie-dye, and that took them to their happy place. This work is a painting. It's about 30 by 40 inches, and it's multimedia. It's oil pastel, and first I started with paint, and it's on a material called Tyvek, which is actually what they insulate houses with, but it's plastic, but one side of it is like rice paper. So when you paint on it, it has this beautiful texture. And as I said, I think of the Hebrew letters as our people animating the text. And I had the experience of traveling to the Czech Republic with a Holocaust Torah and taking it back to its place of origin with my rabbi and several people in my congregation. And I had the privilege of chanting Haftorah on Shabbat in the ruined synagogue of that village where all the Jews had been really rounded up and exported by the Nazis to death camps. So the synagogue was in semi-ruin, but the people from the town invited us to come. And we celebrated Shabbat in that ruined synagogue. And as I looked around me at the people who attended the service, there were a few scattered Jews from various places in the Czech Republic, but most of the people were just non-Jewish townspeople. And I thought of the great vacuum and the great loss of the people of the town who were Jewish. And so I created what I called a ghost scroll. And here you see the horizontal lines, which present the place where the letters ought to be, but the letters are missing in action, just like those people were missing. So I thought about the great potentiality of the ghost scroll where the letters are missing, and it's up to us to enliven the Torah scroll and keep it moving forward. And that's why really it's not an entirely sad piece. It's joyous, because despite what we have suffered in the past and what our people have suffered, we keep it alive and we keep moving forward. Now, technically, this piece is a paper cut, and you can see that it's hung away from the wall about 4 inches. The light penetrates it and creates the designs of the leaves on the wall. And in my mind, the leaves are also kind of a stand-in for Hebrew letters on the living tree of Torah. When I get a good idea, I run with it. So I did several iterations of the ghost scroll. This is actually the first woodcut that I did. I had done like little tiny simple ones, but I'd never really gotten into the medium. And I decided to attend a steamroller printing event, and the artists were tasked with creating a huge woodcut. This is 5 feet by, I think, 32 inches. And I really had I was very inexperienced with woodcuts, so I learned on this huge woodcut that I made. And as I made it, I fell in love with the medium. And you can sort of see, if you look on the left side here, these really rough cuts, that was where I started. So I actually learned how to do woodcut on this piece. And again, it is a ghost scroll. It's got the tree of life in the middle and all the ruled lines for the place that Torah letters would go. And I didn't really explain what a steamroller print is. Let me go back to that. What it means is that you take your huge block, you go to this place at the University of Wisconsin, and they set up tents outdoors. This was in July. And you spend about an hour rolling ink onto this huge wood block. And then you carry it over to the parking lot and lay it on the ground and put a huge piece of white paper over it, and then a carpet pad. And then the steamroller drives right over your block and prints it. And that's how it gets printed. So it's quite an event. And I'm going again this summer. So this is another print of the same ghost scroll print, but this one I colored by hand. I painted it with acrylic paints. So there's a lot you can do with woodcuts. This is another iteration of the Ghost Scroll series, and this was done on Tyvek as well. And it does have cutouts, but I didn't have a photo of it with the light passing through it. So you can see on the perimeter of it, the little cutout shapes that also allow the light to pass through.
What are the, if you could go back to that painting, I see that within the circles there, what's going on in each of the circles there? Like you see the tree with the branches, and then you see circles of varying sizes. And then these colorings are, I'm curious to hear what's going on there.
Well, I guess I was thinking of beyond just the tree of worlds. And so they're like different worlds in orbit around this tree. So I was thinking of sort of galaxy kind of imagery, and playing with positive and negative, because you can see the striping behind them where the letters would go, and they're overlapped. And then those red shapes are leaves. So that's where my mind was going. What were you thinking, Shalheaven?
Oh, that's a great question. Was something that grabbed my eye was the contrast between the circle in the bottom left-hand corner, where there are many small dots in the yellow, pink, and blue. And then also I noticed I'm thinking of the tear. I'm thinking of the piece that you made, and I believe it was in memory of your mother. If memory
Yes.
I remember also like the theme of the teardrops. So I'm seeing that beneath the circle in the bottom. And I contrast that with some of the other circles that are some more contained or have that spreading. For example, like the upper right-hand one has these tears flowing far down, like past an entire branch and into the next one. And so I'm wondering about like the distinction between that which is contained versus that which bleeds.
I loved what you just said. Well, I think for me, I like drips because I think they're very dynamic and they're not always teardrops. Letting things flow emotionally can be joyous as well as sorrowful. I think the little dots it's like an effervescence. I wanted this to just be fizzing with color and life, and that's why I put a lot of dots on it. So, and that is an expression too of the tree of life and Torah, and just joy of gratefulness of being alive. So I hope that kind of addresses what you were asking about. Okay, thank you for asking about it. So this has got a completely different tone. This is an earlier piece from the late 90s, and it's an oil painting, and it's about 5 feet tall, so it's quite large. And it was painted in response to the Bosnian crisis, which I know our teens you're not going to remember that, but there was a terrible war in the Balkans, which resulted in a lot of people, a lot of Muslim Albanians getting rounded up by their neighbors and put in essentially concentration camps. So it really brought up a lot of feelings for those of us who can't help but think about the Holocaust a lot, and that's most of us, Jewish people. So I created this painting, and I used some text, which I quoted here. And it's from Proverbs originally, but it's in the prayer book, and that's where I was familiar with it from. I think it's in Shachrit, the morning prayers, Ma Rabu Ma'asech Adonai Kulam B'chachma Asita Mala Haaretz Kinyanecha. And when I wrote this text on the yellow ribbon that goes over the top, I left off the last word, kinyanecha, thy creatures. The world is full of blank. And it's a kind of ironic look at, yes, the world is full of blessings and wonderful creatures, but it's also full of tragedy and cruelty. So it's really taken a hard look at what has been created for us, the world that we live in. The figure in the center was taken from a newspaper photograph that was, I believe, on the front page of the Chicago Tribune. There is a woman at the head of a column of thousands of refugees, and they'd arrived at the border of Macedonia and they were begging to be let in and being refused. And she kind of had her hands out and like, well, what do I do now? Kind of a gesture, which is a feeling that we have so often when confronted with really a hopeless and sad situation. So there's a lot of complexity in this piece. The Hebrew lettering is actually in there. If you look at the upper right corner, you can see the red mem from Ma Rabu, and it continues and it sort of weaves in and out of the line drawings of the people. So it sort of presents different imagery, as you look at it. This is a woodcut that I did that is about the golem, and I hope you all are familiar with the golem. The golem was created by Rabbi Judah Loew of Prague in response to cruel pogroms against the Jewish community. He took the mud from the Vltava River in Prague and formed a man, and he enlivened it with Kabbalistic magic to be kind of a protector, a Superman or a security guard, essentially, for the Jewish people. And of course, people aren't supposed to create people that way, so it all went wrong, and he had to destroy the golem. And the Hebrew phrase that's surrounding the golem is the same one that I put into the oil painting. How great are thy works, but I left off the last word. You've made it all in wisdom. The earth is full of your blank, because you think about the creation by God, but also people create things, and not everything that we create is so wise. So it's begging the question again, like, what did you make? And was it all great? And what do we have to deal with? So I've really done a lot of woodcuts, and it's a medium that I love. These two works are both inspired really by the Yom Kippur liturgy, thinking about looking within and the balance sheet of our sins and our good deeds. So the first one that I did was the painting on the left. It's an egg tempera painting. It's the same size as the woodcut. They're both 16 inches by 20 inches. And on the left, there's also copper repoussé, which is copper sheet that I have tooled to create a border. And of course, because I make ketubot and illuminated manuscripts, I love border design. It creeps into a lot of my work. And on the left, the face of the owl and the talons, the claws, are also done with that copper. And I thought about my inner self and what that looks like. And it looked sort of like those nesting Russian dolls. And some of them I think are full of light and positive things, and some of them are kind of cracked and damaged, and some of them are dark. So that's how I presented my inner life. And then when I wanted to interpret it as a woodcut, I don't have the benefit of color because I'm only working with black ink. So I had to think of different ways to show things that are light and things that are dark, things that are damaged and things that are whole, and also express the owl. And birds are really a big part of my symbology. I love owls especially. And this is another kind of similar situation where I started with an egg tempera painting and then did a version in woodcut. And I really feel that when you have an idea that you think is a good idea, you should do it more than once. Like I did with the ghost scroll, that was a series of 5 or 6. And this is called Shiva. And it was about sitting Shiva. And the painting on the left is egg tempera on a panel. And when I think of sitting Shiva, I think of folding chairs, because you go to someone's house and they pull out all the folding chairs that they have so that people who come can sit down with them. And the father of a close friend of mine, who I'd known for many years, I knew her father, and I really loved him. He passed away, and I was really sad about it. So I thought about how when somebody dies that we love, we carry them in our heart. So I did the second face of the owl under the wing of the first owl as a heart. And then I interpreted it also in woodcut in a just slightly different way. So another kind of way that I worked with text was I was given a commission to interpret the priestly blessing, and this was a painting for a rabbi. And I did actually several versions of this, and this is one that I kept. This painting is 40 by 30 inches, so it's big. And again, I really love the drips. There they are again. I think they give some vitality to a piece as well. And the priestly blessing, we've all heard it many times. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord deal kindly and graciously with you. May the Lord bestow his favor upon you and grant you peace. It's in the Bible in Numbers. And the rabbi says it and blesses us at the end of the service. So I put the priestly blessing along the branches of the tree. And again, I think of the leaves of the tree as interchangeable in a way with Hebrew letters, because I think of the Torah as something that's very much alive. This piece is called Glass Half Full, and it's 16 by 20 inches. It's egg tempera, which is a medium that was very popular in the Renaissance, sort of before oil painting. And it's a medium that I like to use for my ketubot and also some of my paintings. And the meaning behind this is thinking about when you're sitting at the Seder, and we fill our glass and we celebrate, but then there's the one point where we're reciting the plagues and we empty the glass partially, and thinking about being mindful of the suffering of others, of the suffering of the Egyptians as they drowned in the Red Sea in pursuit of the Hebrews, and taking a moment within your celebration that our people were saved, but it also cost the life of other people. And so I kind of riffed on that to express my feelings about what's going on in Israel, that, there are times when our people is on the upside, and there are times when our people are on the bad side of persecution. So the glass is half full, and I made the division down the center vertically, which of course is not what happens in reality. So the left side is the happy side, where there's a tree of life being nourished from the wine, and the right side is the not so happy side, where there are bad things in this fluid, and it's not wine. So it's really about how, depending on which side of history you're on at any given moment, it can be a celebration or a time of sorrow. And that's true for our enemies, quote unquote, as well as ourselves. Now, this is a woodcut on the left that I made for an exhibition called Violins of Hope. There are violins that were salvaged from after the Holocaust that made their way to Israel, and they were refurbished. So some of them went through the camps, some of them were hidden away, but they were musical instruments which were played by Jewish musicians before the Holocaust and during it. And they tour the world and they are presented to orchestras to play, and they're coming to Illinois, which is where I live. So a group of us, Jewish Artists Collective Chicago, including Ellen Holtzblatt, who's part of this fellowship, made art in response to the Violins of Hope concert. So I made a woodcut called Wedding Dance. And as you can see, there's a violin shape in the middle and people dancing. So I tried to think of the joyful side of the violins and the fact that they play on, and that we celebrate this heritage of music and joy. So I'm going to move into some more work, which is really about thinking about the oppression of the stranger. And this is a phrase from Exodus: "A stranger you shall not oppress, for you know the heart of a stranger, seeing you were strangers in the land of Egypt." And thinking about the immigration situation at our borders today, where our borders are closed, and the crisis of people who are refugees in the world. And this is really a Jewish subject because we are so often refugees. And this photo is from the Greek islands, and these were refugees who made it across the sea from Syria, I believe. And just thinking about these people, and also the people at our southern border who are locked out by barbed wire. I was very taken with the fact that they're given these space age space blankets, which are mylar, which is the same thing that those like birthday party balloons are made from. And it seemed to me that it's a very cold material. It actually was created during the space program. And the coldness of those plastic sheets really bothered me, especially because they don't really work so well if your clothes are wet. So I decided to make a piece from this material. And this is a work, which I'm just blanking on the title. Marie Antoinette is the subject. And Marie Antoinette was the queen during the French Revolution. And she famously said, "Oh, the poor have no bread. Well, then let them eat cake," because she was so out of touch with the needs of the poor. And of course, the royalty was overthrown and they were beheaded. So I made this very elaborate life-size gown in the style of the time of Marie Antoinette, out of these space blankets, which are given to refugees today. And it's printed with little designs. And when and this has been exhibited several times. So when people see it, they think, "Oh, it's so pretty." And they go up to it, and then they're horrified to see, when they look closely, that the design on her gown is actually refugees from Syria with their children, just looking exhausted and hungry. And then the border on the left is a crying baby. So the strip of blue cloth on the ground represents water, because usually refugees have to cross water to get to, where they're going, to safety. And the little orange floaties are, representing children. And then the flower, of course, is sort of a mourning gesture towards those who didn't make it across the ocean. And here's a close-up of the gown. I worked from an accurate pattern from, the time of Marie Antoinette. And her necklace is barbed wire, and which is usually put at borders to keep people out. And then this on the right, this image is a close-up of a photo that I found online of an exhausted father holding his baby who had arrived, washed up on one of these Greek islands.
Why did you choose to have the contrast of like Marie Antoinette and like a Victorian ball gown and these really painful, tragic images that are really meant to stir compassion for the immigrant? So why did you want that contrast?
Okay, that's a great question. And I can answer that because a big part of my aesthetic, when I want to convey ideas that are hard to swallow or hard to look at, I like to use very seductive materials, like pretty colors and lots of detail, to kind of draw you in so that you are faced with the reality of the not so pretty truth of what the concept behind the piece is. So that's just how I work. It's like, come and have some candy, but the candy is poison. I don't know, that sounds really dark, but it's a way of creating a very big contrast between something which was so frivolous, like Marie Antoinette and all her gowns, and Versailles and all the opulence and the unbelievable wealth that was expressed there, all the gold leaf and everything. So pulling up that aesthetic along with the exact opposite of it. Does that answer your question?
Totally.
Okay, so it's a way to get people to look at painful things too. And then you look also, people, the dress is really pretty, and like it's been in shows and people like to have their photo taken with it. So it's this sort of queasy feeling of being attracted to it and knowing that you shouldn't. I don't know, it's kind of complicated. So this is the Marie Antoinette installation. And I just remember the title. It's Marie Antoinette Visits the Border is the title of it. And this was at Northern Illinois University in an exhibit about immigration. And on the opposite wall, like she's looking straight at it, is another piece that I made, which is a little onesie made from the same mylar material. And here you can see the vantage point from behind her is looking straight at this. And it's called Detained, Contained. And the print on the decals on the onesie are actually these two photos of actual refugee children, printed as a repeat pattern. And I made this very accurately. It's even got the kind of snaps that you have, on a baby garment. So it's the contrast between this really cruel reality for these babies who are out there in the world and, a little baby garment. And this was displayed in an exhibit in Berlin about immigration, as well as the one that I just showed you at Northern Illinois University. So not all of my work is kind of Jewish on the very surface of it, but I feel that there are Jewish elements within it. And I'd like to share with you this piece that I made for a fellowship that I was involved in about Abraham Lincoln. And it was sponsored by the University of Illinois. And of course, Lincoln is a big deal here in Illinois. And we actually attended monthly classes online to learn about Lincoln, but also to share our ideas and bring Lincoln into the 21st century and the ideas that were represented by his time. And I decided to create a piece that was the height that kind of reminded you of the physical presence of Lincoln. So the way this was hung, it actually is the actual height of Lincoln. When you go to the bottom of the stovepipe hat, that's where his forehead would have begun. He was a very tall man, especially for his time. He was 6'4". And of course, he is famous for the stovepipe hat. So this piece is really about the sorrow of Lincoln. And I was thinking about cartoons and how when you get hit on the head in a cartoon, they have the birds kind of circling above your head. So the birds that are circling above Lincoln's head here are black crows. And I thought about it as also in cartoons, like sometimes they'll put a black cloud over a person just to show that they're unlucky. So I sort of conflated those two ideas and had these birds just flying above the head of Lincoln as if there was just tragedy following him everywhere, which there was. He and his wife lost, I think, 3 children in childhood. They didn't grow to adulthood, so they survived several of their own children, which was a terrible tragedy. And of course, the Civil War in the United States was an unbelievably bloody war with tens of thousands of casualties on both sides. So I was thinking about the sorrowfulness that attended his life. And yet, he gave us so many wonderful concepts, and he was so filled with humanity and sensitivity for humanity. And I just included these photos so you could see the scale of the piece next to people in the gallery. The strips that hang down are leather strips, black leather strips, and they are laser cut with the words of Lincoln, which I think are so important even today. And this is a close-up on the left of what the words look like. And then the letters that were cut out are laying on the floor. And you can see with the light that the words kind of are, you can see the word all men are created equal. And in the center of the letters are mini balls, which were the type of bullets which were used during the Civil War. And I'd like to read to you some of a very, very famous passage from Lincoln's second inaugural address, which was just 1 month before the Civil War ended officially. So they knew that it was ending. And I'm sure you've all heard this: with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. And this really harkens back to the words of Exodus that I read earlier: and a stranger you shall not oppress, for you know the heart of a stranger, seeing you were strangers in the land of Egypt. This is the President of the United States before the end of the Civil War calling upon the nation to pull together, to be compassionate to those who suffered, regardless of which side they fought for. So the idea of, having compassion for the former adversary, just like the Hebrews were called upon to have compassion for the Egyptians who were chasing them across the Red Sea and who were consumed by the water and drowned. I think that really Lincoln was an artist. So just to finish up, I'd like to share with you this illustration that I did, and it brings it right back to the place I began, which was with children's book illustrations, which have always been something that I love. And I have written and illustrated a children's book about a story about my grandmother, who actually during World War I, her town in Poland was occupied by the German army, which, remember, this is World War I. It's not the Nazis. They were much more humane, but they stole all the livestock from the people. And my grandmother was very attached to her cow, who was named Sonia. And she went to the garrison and she stole her cow back. And she was actually caught, but they actually let her have the cow back. So that's the book that I wrote. And I'm hoping to get it published. It's being presented to publishers in the next couple of weeks. But I just wanted to come full circle with you. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Judith. That was just an incredible range of art, and each piece is just filled with such meaning. So thank you for sharing and giving us an example of how to create conceptual work where you see symbols and imagery and how they meld so beautifully together to evoke within its audience. So thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We're going to move into our mentorship sessions. I wanted to also take a moment to let you all know that we've updated the website so that all of your bios are up, and that over Pesach we were hard at work making sure that all of you are honored. And you can see that at theameninstitute.org. Over Pesach, the students have been working on their early drafts. And so in this session, there will be a lot of tangible art that you'll be able to look back and forth between, and you'll be able to start going into the art and pulling out guidance and working from there, as the final presentations are only about 6 weeks away. So the Omer countdown is already ticking. I hope you all have a beautiful session. I'll keep the rooms open if you want to go over, but they're all up and ready to go for you. Hello.
Hi.
Shalom.
Hi, my love.
Yeah. Timing, I mean, we have to recognize that that it was we started 5 minutes late, and she said like her presentation was tight to the 30, so it's like there wasn't as much. So I think
I
yeah,
just feel bad that like there was no time for Q&A because like as it is, it's going to be overtime, you know?
right, yeah, yeah, there wasn't, but also was it, oh, we're still recording. We'll edit this out.
I mean, I don't mind her knowing that I feel bad that people didn't get to ask her Q&A.